Welcome to Revenue Rehab, your one-stop destination for collective solutions to the biggest challenges faced by marketing leaders today. Now head on over to the couch, make yourself comfortable, and get ready to change the way you approach revenue. Leading your recovery is modern marketer, author, speaker, and chief operating officer at Tegrita, Brandi Starr.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Revenue Rehab. I am your host, Brandi Starr, and we have another amazing episode for you today. I am joined by Emanuel Rose. Emanuel is a recognized expert in lead generation, branding, advertising, and the day-to-day operations of a digital agency ready to help you build your business today. As the CEO of Strategic E-Marketing, Emanuel is at the forefront of driving digital solutions with machine learning for lead generation. Emanuel's book, Authenticity Marketing to Generation Z, focuses on how companies can effectively market to Generation Z by being authentic and transparent in their branding and messaging. Emanuel, welcome to Revenue Rehab. Your session begins now.
Outstanding. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
I am excited to have you, and we have an amazing topic today. But before we jump into that, I like to break the ice with a little woo-saw moments that I call buzzword banishment. Yeah. So tell me, what overused buzzword would you like to get rid of forever?
Make my marketing go viral.
Yes, I think viral has been banished a few times because I think anybody that knows anything about marketing hates that term because you can't make anything go viral.
Right. And it kind of gets, it just goes against the grain of good marketing, right? Like your ICP is not necessarily viral. It could just be 10 people or 30 people or one person.
Yeah. And that, especially in B2B, it really cracks me up because, on the consumer side, I can see some benefit in all the buzz that happens with things that go viral. But on the B2B side, it's just a bunch of random people looking at your stuff. It doesn't help move the needle in one way or another. And it's not always good.
No, it's a vanity thing. And it's just a funny, shiny object that people want to participate in.
Yes. Well, I can promise I will not talk about making anything go viral today.
Okay.
And so now that we've gotten that off our chest, tell me what brings you to Revenue Rehab today?
Well, I'm excited to talk about marketing and marketing to Generation Z.
I was going to say that one is a hard one. I realize Gen Z started as those people who were born right after I got out of high school. Yeah. And although I feel like I just graduated, in all actuality, that was a long time ago. And, we've got a significant portion of them in the workforce now. So before we really dive into how we accomplish this, I believe in setting intentions. It gives us focus, it gives us purpose, and most important, it gives our audience an understanding of what they should expect from our discussion today. So what's your best hope? What would you like people to take away from the discussion?
That they're going to build their marketing campaigns around video that is produced with the CEO or the leader of their organization. And let that be the hub that all the other spokes of marketing come from.
Interesting. Let's, before we get there, because I am very intrigued by the specificity of that takeaway. So let's just talk about Gen Z for a little bit. I saw statistically that by, in 2025, Gen Z is going to make up 27% of the workforce, and that's going to continue to increase as more of the boomers start to retire. Yeah. And so, and just thinking about some of the typical facts of Gen Z, first generation that is considered fully digital, They have different ideas around, what the workplace and workforce should look like. So talk to me about marketing to them. Why do we need to think about Gen Z as decision makers differently than we have other generations?
Well, like you said, they're a unique segment in the marketplace, not just in the United States, but really globally, as the first fully digital generation, like not knowing a day without internet and a mobile phone. So that is some sophistication because of that. And then there's some slowness because of that also. But the sophistication is they've seen every piece of marketing that the silverbacks that we are have produced, and so they can sniff out inauthentic or salesy or bad marketing very quickly. Not the least of which because they have a very short attention span. So this phenomenon of TikTok brain, or the 2.6 seconds that you have to get a message in front of these types of people, is a reality. And it's not just them. We're all getting much shorter attention spans. We have a shorter attention span than goldfish at this point, literally.
Yeah. And, I definitely see that. And I mean, I even think about, you talked about video a bit. When video first became popular, I can remember watching a 6, 7, 10-minute video was common.
Yeah.
And now even myself, I'm like, oh, it's longer than 3 minutes. Like either I'm going to put it on 2x speed or I'm going to abandon altogether, because I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't have time for that. And, sometimes I wonder whether it is that we're all stretched thin in terms of time, or whether it's attention span. But so we talked about some of the sophistication. What are those drawbacks that we are seeing, those blind spots that Gen Z has as well?
Due to a number of things, they're slower to develop in terms of life stages. Like if you think about what you were doing when you were 25, what I was doing when I was 25, I had a full-time job. I had started my own business. I was living in an apartment in a big city. I was completely separate financially from my parents. This group tends to be more of the still under the guidance and finance of their parents versus being completely independent. So they're slower to take on these life stages. COVID, the economies, whatever, all these things that contribute to that. But that's just a general fact.
Okay. And so, I think where I see some of the sort of obvious differences in marketing is on more of the consumer brand side. And there's some very clear things that, I see them do, where I think there is a little bit more uncertainty is on the business to business side, as we are starting to see Gen Z be more of a part of the decision making, the buying committee.
Yeah.
What are some of the considerations for B2B marketers in thinking about the fact that they definitely buy differently? So what are some of the things we need to think about in those differences?
The first thing is, and it's going to sound funny when I say it, but we have to be digital first. Like we have to have it be highly consumable digital assets that walk this person who is an early age executive, junior executive, and not very experienced, but typically have a very high opinion of themselves. And so you're kind of dealing with two of the biggest challenges there in terms of sales and marketing, right? Somebody who doesn't know a lot, but they think they know a lot. So you've got to walk them through this process and educate them. We know now that it takes 6 hours and 32 touches in a B2B sale to get completion. So they're very smart as a group. They're very committed to education. And if they're into something, they're going to dig deep in it. So you've got to have a lot of stair stepping in through that content journey in order to make sure they have enough. The other thing we know is speed to lead, and I know you probably know this, is 84% of the people who are the first vendor that is contacted, they are the vendor that is ultimately contracted. So first contacted, and then contracted. And then we have 5 minutes from when they show interest to when that lead starts to deteriorate and turn into not a viable lead. So we have to be able to be very dynamic, very personalized, and very educational in the B2B sales for these junior executives.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because, it's like I think about years ago when I talked about the number of touches, like I remember when 7 was the number.
Right.
And, like the way that we developed nurtures and our overall strategy was how do we get to those 7 touches?
Yes.
And I can remember a time having to think through the content that was required to support 7, thinking about 32 touches and 6 hours of consumption over that can feel quite overwhelming. And even the thought process of 5 minutes, like I can remember sales SLAs were 24 hours,
right.
Or even 72 hours for some of those larger sales. So to say 5 minutes, it's like it all feels very overwhelming. And so I want to ground our discussion in why we've got to tackle this and why this is important. Because some people would say, if only 27% of the workforce is Gen Z, that means that percentage is even smaller in terms of the decision makers. This is a problem for the future and not for today.
Yeah.
And so what do you say to those people that are like, I don't have the resources, the capacity, the whatever to solve for this right now?
It's like they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So you're looking at 68 million people that will be entering the workforce from Gen Z over the next decade. So we've got to build systems and processes now. You don't have to eat the whole elephant all at once, but you've got to start building these systems that are highly responsive, highly dynamic, highly personalized, and provide a lot of under the hood views and anticipate with good marketing what that client needs to self-educate. That's not changing. And in a lot of ways, that's no different than it has been. Yeah, the number of touches is bigger. I give you that. And that it can seem overwhelming, but we have so many more awesome tools at our disposal to take content like this and turn it into 64 pieces of touches, right? So it takes a little bit of a reframe. And for those of us that are Gen X and baby boomers, we got to wrap our heads around making that change or mandating that change in our organizations.
Yeah, and it is definitely one of those things. Like I know I preach a lot internally about being able to repurpose and scale content, because when you think about, if we think about 32, and I'll just say for 32 touches, 32 pieces of content for simple math, if we think about that the way that we used to develop content,
right,
it becomes almost impossible. It's like 32 is all I got. But you are right. Between AI and all the different mediums that we have, we do have the ability to take things and to scale them. So I think that grounds us in why this is important, because I do agree it is happening more and more. And I find that companies struggle a lot to pivot. And the types of things that people are engaging with and the way that we think about it. I think about content that used to be considered bottom of the funnel. Now, this generation is looking more at the top, like because of things like Yelp and Google reviews and TripAdvisor, like they're starting with testimonials and case studies as opposed to ending with it, for the older generation.
They start with a UGC. I mean, that's the brutal part. they don't just want influencers like Kylie Jenner and Jake Paul. They want their best friend to be their influencer too.
Yeah. And that is one of the things that I think that a lot of older marketers, I hate to like put it on an age thing, but us old timers, I do think that that is the place where just working with different companies that they're not making that adjustment, whether it's looking at lead scoring or where they are passing things over to sales, like the process is very, very different. Are you seeing the same things?
Process is very, very different, and we're in that challenging time, especially on the B2B side, where we have this multi-generational sales process. And so you're talking about, you got boomers, X, millennials, and Zs all in the same marketplace. So you're not just talking about repurposing, you're talking about rebranding for 4 completely different types of buyers.
Yeah, and let's talk practically about what does that look like? Because I definitely like thinking about different opportunities that I've been a part of, or looking at analyzing certain client data. You really do see multi-generations in a single opportunity as influencing the sales. And so when you talk about, rebranding content and how we cater across them, help paint the picture for me of what does that look like?
Well, it starts with, we always start with the ideal client profile, and then we go, especially in B2B, then we go to that content journey. And we know it's a committee. It's usually 3 to 8 people on that buying committee, right? And that's the other way that modern B2B sales has gotten complicated, is that it's not just the CEO or the sales director making the decision. It's this group. So you've got to understand who's in that committee, and then start to reframe. Okay, I have a podcast blog post, and do I take that and then build that into 6 memes that will be interesting into the millennial and Z group? Or do I build that into a TikTok campaign or a TikTok ad campaign, right? So it just, you have to start to move the pieces and the channels based on the committee and the age group that they are. And you can guarantee you're going to be selling into all 4 of those age groups. And so you should take the time in advance to chart that out, take that piece of content, and then rehab it or refurb it for each of those groups. That's how I'd approach it.
Yeah. And I think the key thing that makes me think about is, historically, we have only been marketing to that person that is directly like that main contact for an opportunity. But now that whole buying committee, even though, it's kind of, they talk about dark funnel, like the buying committee mainly is a part of the dark funnel. So it is one of those things that we've got to be providing all the content that speaks to all of those different generations and types of buyers, even when we don't know that they are directly engaged with us. And I know that can be a really difficult component as well.
Yeah. And then in the direct consumer realm, you have to look at the Z as the influencer to the Gen X mom or the millennial mom or millennial dad. So you've got to have cool factor, UGC influencer style for the Z. And then you've got to have a little more traditional standard marketing for the parents in that situation, right? Because you have 2 targets.
Yeah, that is definitely a great point. Now I want to transition a little bit and talk about branding and messaging. And I know in your book, authenticity and transparency are 2 things that you talk about as being really important. Can you share a bit more of your perspective on that?
Well, this group demands authenticity, and that almost is one of your buzzwords. So we have to kill, even though it's the title of my book. I'll accept that. I haven't found a replacement word for it yet, so that's the challenge. But they demand this transparency or this humanness of the brand, right? this is a group that grew up on Kylie Jenner, and seeing her in her bathroom putting on makeup and talking about every boyfriend and crying over every, dropped Starbucks cup. So this level of intimacy is what they expect. And that is the biggest challenge for those of us who are not from that generation. When I grew up in business, when I was a kid in my 20s, you kept your personal life personal and your business life in business, right? The lines are a little more blurred now, and they want to know, what do you believe in? What's your family like? How are you spending your weekends? What do you like about your employees? What's great about the clients that you work with? Oh yeah, and by the way, you have a product too that they might be interested in. But they want to know you as a human being first, and so you've got to follow some of that in your content.
Yeah, and I know that just from talking to other leaders with Gen X and especially boomers, that has been one of the key struggles because, I can remember like LinkedIn was very strictly professional only, sharing anything personal was like super taboo.
Yeah.
And now that line is, it's not quite like Facebook blurred, but it is very, it's very personal and very human. And the ability to research the leaders of a company and actually find out about them is something that's also important to Generation Z, which I find interesting. And a lot of the older generations really sort of push back against that in not wanting to put themselves out there. I've heard people who have taken pride in not being searchable. Like you can't find much about them when you search them. And it's like, I get it, but at the same time, it is like now actually becoming a part of the decision criteria.
100%. And to me, it's like being a wagon wheel maker. Yeah. Okay. That's cool. You do that, but you're no longer relevant. And so your digital score, your digital presence needs to be maintained at a level that's professional and manicured and revealing as much as you're comfortable revealing. And the more that you're able to talk about what you do when you're not working is equally as important as what you are doing when you're working.
Yeah. And I am what do they call it? Exennial, where I'm right on the cusp. Like I'm technically Gen X, but very on the cusp of millennial. And so I've been a lot more comfortable with social media and, having an online presence and those sorts of things. And I have actually seen that come up in both our sales cycle as well as our hiring process, where people are like, oh yeah, I saw you were on vacation, in this place. I've been wanting to go there. And it's because I have a public Instagram where, it is curated. I don't put my entire life there, but you get a lot of who I am as an individual outside of work. And it really has come up in those scenarios where people feel this personal connection and therefore wanting to either work for us or work with us as a service provider.
Yep. Oh, yeah. The old sales axiom about we want to do business with people we know, like, and trust. Well, we build that personal brand digitally now as much as we do in person. So that's a great example of that.
So I want to get back to what you talked about at the beginning. Video produced by a leader. And that be the center in which all your other content is developed. So talk to me some more about this, because I definitely hear video all the time. I hear putting your leaders, out front, but the way that you phrase that is a little bit unique. So I definitely love to have you expand on that.
Yeah, you bet. I think if we look at, I was talking about earlier, we look at Jake Paul, we look at Kylie Jenner, we look at Elon Musk, right? Those are the social CEOs. Those are billionaires or billionaires in the making. And so we need to emulate what they're doing. And that's what I talked about in a book called The Social Media Edge, which was We all have to be the primary influencer for our brand as the leader of the company, and emulate these people who are the rock stars of business right now. And then to follow a very simple process, which is 90 seconds on Monday morning, 8 a.m. You're going to talk about a fundraiser that you went to. You're going to talk about your family. You're going to talk about your employee of the week. You're going to talk about your customer of the week, or you're going to talk about product. One of those things every Monday. 90 seconds, shoot it on the iPhone, send it to the marketing department, and build this content from video that then we know repurposes in these 64 things, the Gary Vaynerchuk style. And your marketing department will love you for it, number one, as the leader of the business. And number two, you're laying down that foundation of being a humanized brand, which is the differentiator that we have now as small and mid-sized businesses in the age of AI, because there's an avalanche of options out there, and it's harder and harder to find human brands in this avalanche.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. It's, there's several people I follow on LinkedIn who are kind of do this spot the AI kind of thing, because there is so much out there that is clearly AI developed with very little human input.
Yeah.
And although I, definitely a big advocate, use AI every day, but it is very easy to allow the technology to remove the human angle in there. So thinking about advice. So for, we talking about our challenges is just the first step, and nothing changes if nothing changes. And so in traditional therapy, the therapist gives the client some homework, but here at Revenue Rehab, we like to flip that on its head and ask you to give us some homework. So for those listening who are recognizing that their efforts in reaching Gen Z are probably not where they need to be, what's your one thing? What advice would you give as the first action to help move in the right direction?
Would be do exactly what we're doing here and become a podcast guest and talk about your company, your processes, your services, you as a professional, and get very comfortable talking about that and being engaging as a podcast guest with the goal of being able to be that social CEO.
I love it. And I definitely advocate for that. Being a podcast host, I think finding guests is always the hardest part. So getting more people out there, I'm always in. But no, in all seriousness, I do agree that is a great way to really get exposure to audiences that are not those that are already paying attention to your company, and being able, we talk about social selling and founder-led selling and all sorts of other buzzwords, but at the end of the day, having the leaders of the organization be front and center, putting that message out into the world does go a long way. And I think it goes a long way with all generations. So I think that becomes a win-win as well.
Yeah, I mean, think back to iconic brands and, Ray Kroc for McDonald's, and, you can track all these rock stars of business. But we have the tools and the capability now to do it as a small solopreneur, small business, mid-sized business. It's the philosophical change that has to change. Has to be switched. So,
and my very last question, because I just thought about this: how do you address turnover? Because this is something that I've seen a number of large companies have hesitation with, really, whether it's the CEO or other executives, really having those faces out front, there is always a risk that they will leave or be let go. What do you say to that? Like, how do you help to minimize that risk, or do you just not worry about it?
Well, I think we all know there's transition times, right? And either people age out or they philosophy out of organizations. And the reality is that the leader is the primary philosophical source, right? Even if it's from a board of directors, they're the primary philosopher or the leader. So it's just the natural part of it, and you have to just manage it. No way around it.
Okay, yeah. So basically, we can't worry about it.
Yeah.
Well, Emanuel, I have enjoyed our discussion, but that's our time for today. But before we go, tell our audience how to connect with you, and definitely do the shameless plug. Tell us about what your company does.
Sure. Yeah, you can find me by Googling Emanuel Rose, or going on Amazon looking for Emanuel Rose, or going to strategicemarketing.com. And I've been running for the last 15 years a full service digital marketing agency, and we have clients that are both B2B and B2C, and love to have a conversation about marketing to Gen Z or implementing AI into your marketing processes.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to join me. I have definitely enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you so much, Brandi. I've really enjoyed it myself.
I hope everyone has enjoyed my conversation with Emanuel. I can't believe we're at the end. Until next time, bye-bye.
You've been listening to Revenue Rehab with your host, Brandi Starr. Your session is now over, but the learning has just begun. Join our mailing list and catch up on all our shows at revenuerehab.live. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Revenue Rehab. This concludes this week's session. We'll see you next week.